the last 15 years ish, 10 to 15 years, there have been a number of New Testament introductions that have tried to do the cultural angle, Jewish, Greco-Roman, or some of them are more Greco-Roman than Jewish, and some are more Jewish than Greco-Roman.
What's an
That's
example of that, Ben?
the Tom Wright, Mike Bird one, and then the Coic
Yeah.
and Green and Burge, but then Coic dropped out in the second edition. Both of those volumes, one is written at a higher audience than the other, but both of those are recent attempts to really introduce the Old Testament in light of culture. What's interesting though about the New Testament documents is that they tell you what they're interacting with.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, in other words, we don't have New Testament authors pulling from the Mishnah. Now, I know the Mishnah was later codified, but there was a core oral tradition that predates the New Testament, but they're not pulling from it over and over again, or the Apocrypha. They're not, I mean, maybe indirectly at points, or maybe there's something going on there, but by and large, there are over 350 quotations to the New Testament, a couple thousand, if not more, allusions to the Old Testament. They're telling you what they're interacting with, and they're placing the people of God in a particular context. Yes, there are points of contact with Second Temple Judaism and in the feasts, but by and large, what they're doing is that they're pulling from the Old Testament, from the Pentateuch, from Genesis 1 to 3. They keep returning over and over again to that text. And it should really tell you how to read the New Testament. They're actually telling you, they really are telling you, this is how you read it. You read it in light of the Old Testament. You don't read it primarily against the backdrop of what's happening in Rome in the first century or in Jude. You know, it's, I mean,
Right.
that's helpful. It's helpful, of course.
Well, nowadays, I mean, people might not realize, but it wasn't too long ago where you had very sharp departments. Now, I'm not saying there are New Testament guys who don't focus in New Testament anymore, but to be a responsible New Testament scholar, or even really an Old Testament scholar, you have to be well versed in the Old or the New Testament, and the Bible as a whole.
Right.
And that, it wasn't too long ago, and in some departments, even today at other institutions, the New Testament guys, there's a silo. And you don't, talking about the Old Testament is verboten. Methodological.
That was actually true at evangelical seminaries and colleges. I witnessed it myself, and I know in some cases that at least one New Testament professor didn't even know Hebrew, or hardly could read it because it wasn't that relevant. So it's amazing. So there was quite a distinction in those, and when they did attempt to relate the Old to the New, they would say that the New Testament writers preached the right doctrine, but from the wrong Old Testament text. In other words, they twisted what the meaning of the Old Testament was, but it was inspired. God inspired it. It's a wrong interpretative method, but God inspired it, so they could still hold to inerrancy in some weird way and teach at these conservative seminaries. Now, one of the books that does that, if the audience wants to see, and these are friends of mine, and so I say this in politeness, but the Fee and Stewart book, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth, has a chapter on the use of the Old and the New, where they actually argue that the New Testament writers, for example, the use of Hosea 11:1 and Matthew 2:15, are interpreting those texts in a way different from the original meaning. And so there's a good example of an evangelical book, very popular, and that book has a lot of good things in it. I have my students read it, but that's an example of what you're talking about. So it just was not. Most of these scholars in the late 70s and 80s were trained at places like Harvard. That's where they got their doctorates. And, the German school of thought was not one in which the Old Testament was important. The key in the German school of thought was the Greco-Roman background. And in one of the New Testament introductions that Ben Glad just mentioned, really focuses on the Greco-Roman backgrounds. And it's been said, you don't have hardly any quotations from the Greco-Roman background, much less direct allusions. Now, let me back up and say, nevertheless, this book, for example, by Cowick, et cetera, there's much valuable material there. And you must study the New Testament in the light of its environment. And there are many fruitful insights from the Greco-Roman background, but it pales in comparison to the background that the New Testament authors are alerting us to primarily. So I don't want to diminish these works. They are very helpful, but let's do the first things first.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Right. I mean, think too, Camden, about even the doctrine of the clarity of Scripture. I mean, if you say that Greco-Roman or even Jewish backgrounds are primary, I have to use that word primary. If they are primary to reading the New Testament, we have a doctrine of Scripture problem, because what you're saying is that in order for your layman or laywoman to read a New Testament document, they cannot do so well unless they are fluent and have read all of those sources. I mean, that's a big problem theologically, right? I mean, that's a big problem.
It's an enormous problem.
It is a tall order, Ben, just to add to this, it's still a tall order to tell people they got to know their Old Testament.
That's true too. That's true too.
But that's what we have to do.
That's true too.
And that goes back to your earlier comment about education. It's not just New Testament teachers and scholars that have to know the Old, but preachers have to know the Old and the New. And people in the congregation, as a typical Christian, needs increasingly to realize we have one Bible, not just a New Testament, and how that New Testament fits into that one Bible. It's a tall order to get people to go back and really learn their Old Testaments, but I think that's what we have to do, and we have to remember that was the only Bible for the first century church, the Old Testament. The New Testament was being written, and so the Bible they had was the Old Testament, and we need to remember that and be sure that the canonized New Testament now does not just replace the Old Testament, but it is the unfolding of that Old Testament.